This senseless act of violence took place over 25 years ago. The silence of the evening streets in Greene County, Tennessee, USA, was shattered by the sound of gunfire. Law enforcement quickly recognized the scene. The officers found a murdered family at the site, shot and stacked on top of each other. Now, they had to solve one of the most shocking cases in American criminal history. The father of the family, Lillelid, came from Bergen, Norway. Despite his young age of only 20, he decided to embark on a fateful journey and ended up in Florida, USA. Here, the young man wanted to fulfill his dreams. He was the youngest of 4 children in his family and had been a modest, kind, and positive young man from a young age. He dreamed of having a wife and children, and a good future for them. Lillelid met Delphina, who was born in New Jersey in March 1969. The couple decided to move to Miami and got married in February of the following year. In 1991, the newlyweds had their first child, a girl they named Tabitha. Soon, the couple realized they wanted a quieter life. Away from the hustle and bustle of Miami, they began searching for a more peaceful place to grow their family and ended up on the outskirts of Knoxville, Tennessee, in a suburb called Powell. It was a typical American suburb, quiet and peaceful with idyllic views of nature and a tight-knit community. The young couple was warmly welcomed by the residents of the town. It seemed as though their search for a better place to live had ended, and they could enjoy life in peace. In 1995, the couple had a son named Peter. The Lillelids decided to buy a larger house so that each family member could have their own room. They moved into a 50-year-old house in 1996, one of the most remarkable creations of architectural genius, located in the suburb. Once the family moved in, they immediately began making ambitious plans for the future. To live a full life, extensive repairs on the old house and various household structures were necessary. The couple enthusiastically set to work, with the top priority being the renovation of the guest house where Delphina's mother was supposed to live. The young family was not wealthy and had bought the house because of its low price. They were aware of the amount of work needed but were determined to overcome all difficulties together. Their friends and relatives remembered the Lillelids as people dedicated to their faith and family. They worked tirelessly. Delphina worked in a local restaurant and dedicated her free time to raising Tabitha and Peter, envisioning a bright and wonderful future for her children. The Lillelids were very religious. In April 1997, the local community held a large congress in a neighboring state, a gathering for everyone wanting to deepen their faith and learn how best to do so. April 6, 1997, was the last day of these meetings. The community invited the family for dinner, but the Lillelids were eager to get home and lacked the necessary funds. They had spent most of their savings on the trip and new clothes for all family members to fit into the Congress atmosphere. The young couple and their children were grateful for the invitation but decided to celebrate in a smaller circle. On their way back, they planned a picnic to celebrate the occasion and create a party atmosphere for the children. As they traveled, Peter complained of a severe headache. It was already 7:30 p.m., and it was starting to get dark. Lillelid pulled off the highway near Greene County, Tennessee, parked at a rest area, and decided to take a walk with the boy to clear his head. Meanwhile, Delphina and Tabitha went to the restroom, where they encountered a few strange girls. At the restroom exit, Peter and his father were already standing across from the spot where the family had stopped. They had finished their walk, and Peter felt better as they waited for the return of his mother and Tabitha to organize a snack. At that moment, they were noticed by several people. In Knoxville, there was a small motel called the Colonial Motel, where a bunch of young people from Kentucky had checked into one of the rooms. There were 6 of them: 18-year-old Natasha Cornett, 17-year-old Karen Howell, 20-year-old Joseph Risner, 14-year-old Jason Bryant, 19-year-old Edward Dean Marlin, and 18-year-old Crystal Sturgill. Most of them had trouble with the law, abusive parents, dysfunctional families, and domestic violence. These young men and women found it hard in school and banded together to survive, loitering around and leading an unhealthy lifestyle. They consumed alcohol and illegal substances. The young people lived in different towns, roamed the country, stayed in motels, and usually rented a room for an extended period. This time, they checked into the Colonial Motel on April 4th, just a few days before they struck with their truly inhuman brutality in Tennessee. The young men drew attention from the motel management in the first few days due to their strange and defiant behavior. They painted pentagrams and tridents on the walls and brought necessary utensils. Feeling free from the control of the older generation, the youths ignored moral and social norms. Initially, it all had the character of occultism and self-mutilation. At night, candles flickered in front of the windows. Some of these young men and women used razor blades to cut each other's hands. This action was not only a protest against the suffering but also a cry for help that went unheard. Society was indifferent to them. Most had endured years of cruelty and tyranny, leading them to a series of brutal events. The young people often behaved inappropriately, causing significant damage to the hotel room, breaking many pieces of furniture, and painting the walls. The ordinary room quickly became a hideout for drug addicts, regularly engaging in what could be called ritual acts. It reflected their inner chaos and anger. When Delphina and her daughter saw the 2 girls in the restroom, they turned out to be guests of the hotel, Natasha and Karen. At first glance, they seemed like normal teenagers but were, in reality, real lunatics with a long history of drug addiction and petty crime. They eagerly participated in occult activities and satanic rituals, ready to cross the line of what was permissible. Psychiatrists who later worked with these young people found that they were simply trying to find their place in life. The young men were victims of years of torture and cruelty, manifesting as hatred for the world. They were on a level where bloodthirstiness and violence had become the norm and a way to assert themselves among their peers. Obviously, they had no good intentions or kindness in their minds. They created an underground community ready to do more than just silently draw pentagrams. They wanted revenge, as brutal as possible. The leader of the group was Natasha Cornett. She declared that she would trigger the Armageddon and claimed that they could not be stopped and were determined to take revenge on the entire world. Natasha had made similar confessions before, but no one had paid much attention to them. It was probably the lack of interest and ignoring her words that led to these extremes. Natasha claimed to have been talking to angels and demons since childhood. From a young age, she called herself the daughter of Satan and was obsessed with witchcraft, which was exacerbated by her abuse of alcohol and illegal substances. By 7th grade, she developed an eating disorder that led to hospitalization in Lexington. Doctors diagnosed her with severe manic-depressive disorder, anxiety, and an obsessive desire to harm herself and others. At the age of 14, she was admitted to a psychiatric clinic for disturbed teenagers. The doctors did everything to help Natasha resolve her socialization and family problems. Unfortunately, this did not bring the expected success. At 17, Natasha found her love and was married for a while to a man named Stephen Cornett. However, when he realized he was dealing with an abnormal person and saw how dangerous she was, he decided to separate from her. This disturbed Natasha's fragile mental balance, and her condition worsened after moving to New Orleans, where she became the victim of a brutal attack involving 5 men. This event caused her severe emotional distress and worsened her mental disorders. Natasha dreamed of experiencing a film-like killing spree, with a young couple traveling across America and killing anyone who got in their way. Once, she even threatened her mother with a knife and ran away from home. At the time of the events in question, she was at the height of her problems, posing a real threat to herself and others. To find a way to realize her film dream, Natasha gathered like-minded people around her after running away from home. Many of them had similar issues. Natasha's best friend was Karen Howell, who was also into witchcraft. She came from a broken family, had a long history of substance and alcohol abuse, and was constantly causing trouble, even at home. During her school years, her parents had serious relationship problems, and she repeatedly witnessed violent confrontations and physical abuse by her father. Like her best friend, she was obsessed with harming herself and others. She attempted suicide 4 times. Karen exhibited erratic behavior and was unable to integrate into school, changing 4 schools due to constant quarrels and complaints from teachers. Eventually, she was homeschooled, but staying in a toxic home made things worse. During this time, she began holding Ouija sessions and trying to communicate with demonic beings. On top of that, she regularly used drugs. She became the second passenger in the car, carrying weapons for the gang. At the wheel of the broken-down car was Karen's boyfriend, Joseph Risner. Joseph was born on October 13, 1976, in Hazard. He did not know his biological father and took his stepfather's last name. In 1986, the family moved to Georgia, but the parents' relationship significantly deteriorated there. Later, they divorced, and his mother, Mary, became actively involved in church activities. By this time, Joseph was already known as a drug addict. He had started using drugs at the age of 10 and quickly moved on to hard substances. Joseph claimed to have had intimate experiences with 2 nannies who took care of him when he was 12 years old. In 1993, his mother remarried, and at 18, Joseph continued to use illegal substances, leading to problematic interactions with peers. Joseph dated Natasha Cornett for a while before they broke up, but their friendship remained. Afterward, he dated her best friend, Karen. In 1995, he joined the army, hoping for a military career, but he failed because of his drug use and was discharged. Joseph decided to leave everything behind and joined a group gathered by Natasha. At this time, Natasha was the group's leader and had met a new boyfriend, Edward Dean Marlin. He had recently joined them. Edward was born on January 26, 1978, and had lived in a decent family for a long time. He seemed like a normal teenager, avoiding trouble with the law and not engaging in criminal activities, working at a local grocery store. Edward was very religious and attended church with his family. But that changed when he met Natasha. The girl clearly dominated him, causing negative and disturbing changes in his behavior. He stopped going to church and turned to the dark side. His parents noticed what was happening and tried to intervene in the relationship to bring their son back to his normal life. But Natasha's influence was stronger than his mother's words. He ran away from home and moved into a motel. Their love went so far that the couple planned a wedding. The youngest in the group was 14-year-old Jason, born on July 18 in the small mining town of Hellier. Despite his young age, he had long been on the police radar and was on probation at the time of the events in question. The main problems began after he encountered drugs and alcohol. In fact, the young man's troubles started much earlier than meeting Natasha. At school, he was found to have developmental delays, with an IQ not exceeding 85. This led to negative emotional and social shifts. His parents were indifferent to what was happening, worsening the situation. After meeting Natasha, he decided to join the group. During this time, he was participating in a rehabilitation program. Professionals worked with him, trying to reintegrate him into normality, but in the end, it was not enough. The young man gave up. Natasha and Jason drank each other's blood, calling it an act of great love. They truly believed that such a thing would strengthen their bond. Crystal Sturgill was born on March 13, 1979, in the town of Harold. In elementary school, her grades were above average, but that changed when she started high school and began using drugs. The girl experienced no major shocks in her early years, making her seem the most normal of the group. She had at most a few quarrels over her younger brother, who was bullied at school. She smoked in the locker room, incurring the wrath of teachers. In December 1996, more serious problems began. Crystal reached puberty, started constantly arguing with her parents, and running away from home. There was a police report. The girl said that her stepfather had long abused and repeatedly raped her, stopping only when she had a boyfriend. The stepfather denied these accusations, and those close to him sided against the girl, calling her a liar. As a result of the court proceedings, she was placed in social services, moving through 13 different families before meeting Natasha and joining the group. Natasha Cornett's plans for Armageddon began to come true on April 6. The group broke into the house of a police officer living in a neighboring district. Jason caused a disturbance outside to distract the homeowner while the others sneaked in and stole 9mm and .25 caliber pistols, 2 boxes of ammunition, and $500 in cash. From that point, their plan for the apocalypse took shape. Then they drove back to Knoxville, where they would begin their bloody march. Joseph drove a blue Chevrolet station wagon used by a gang of crazed youths. The car was in such poor condition that it looked like it would not survive the trip and fall apart halfway. Because of this, the driver was in a hurry, exceeding the speed limit by more than 30 miles per hour before being stopped by the police. They received a fine, but that was the least of the legal problems the young people faced. They were eventually released, and all 6 armed individuals passed the traffic stop unscathed. The young men realized they needed a suitable vehicle to carry out their plans, so one of the primary tasks was to find a vehicle to steal. It was necessary to act quickly and decisively before the Chevrolet really broke down. So, a group of disturbed youths with weapons set out to commit terrible crimes. They loitered around, coming up with a plan. Then they met the Lillylid family on their way home, stopping at the restroom. As Karen and Natasha lingered in the restroom, the other car occupants discussed the crime. The young men realized they had left a trail when they received a fine for speeding. At this point, they had stolen weapons, money, and ammunition in the car. They knew they could be caught and that this would be grounds for serious charges. To avoid prosecution, the Satanists wanted to remodel the car. They first thought they could burn it. At this point, the youths saw Peter and his father when the Lillylid family stopped at the parking lot where the teenagers were and immediately caught their attention. As Delphina left the restroom, she was confronted by Natasha and Karen, who were dressed in dark clothing. The woman asked the girls if they believed in God, which the teenagers denied. Delphina then offered them a religious brochure, and her naive and kind husband invited the young people to a picnic. The Satanists noticed that the family had traveled in a Dodge, which seemed perfect for their bloodthirsty plans. A sinister plan formed in the young men's minds. Against this backdrop, the criminals decided to act. Naturally, they agreed and joined the family's meal. Joseph and Jason were the first to arrive at the table, followed almost immediately by Natasha and Karen. Joseph took advantage of the situation and returned to the car where Edward and Crystal were sitting. In a whisper, he told the couple they were ready for action. He took the 9mm pistol and told Edward to take the .25mm pistol. As he approached the family with the pistols, the friendly Joseph changed. He slowly walked back across the parking lot, ensuring no random witnesses were around, then pointed the weapon at Lilylid, apologizing for what was happening and saying nothing would happen to them if they obeyed. At gunpoint, he escorted the car owners to the minivan. Lilylid offered them money and the car in exchange for their freedom, but the Satanists wanted to take all four from the parking lot to a remote location. They forced the whole family into the van, where Natasha, Karen, Joseph, and Jason sat. Joseph's Chevrolet followed them, leaving Edward and Crystal behind. Lilylid drove the minivan with the 9mm pistol in hand to control the man's actions. Inside the van, the atmosphere was tense, and Delphina began singing to 6-year-old Tabitha to calm the little girl. Jason ordered them to be gagged, and Natasha offered the child chocolates. They drove a few miles before turning onto the first side road they could find. They drove a few more miles before stopping at an isolated spot. The Lilylids held hands and prayed to God to save them from this evil. The Satanists began to debate what to do next. From this point, their stories diverged significantly. Natasha feared letting the family go, thinking they might betray them, but she didn't want to hurt the children. Lilylid and Delphina offered money again in exchange for their lives, pleading to be let go and promising not to go to the police. The young gang argued among themselves. Some wanted to kill the entire family. Jason didn't want to let the captives go but promised not to harm the children. He convinced Karen and Natasha to return to the van where Joseph was. Then shots were fired outside. The 34-year-old Lilylid was shot multiple times. The first bullet hit his eye, and then the attacker shot him 5 times in the chest at close range using both stolen pistols. Then the shooter fired 8 times at Delphina, shattering her thigh with 2 bullets and hitting her arm with 1. The young mother was then shot in the stomach as she lay on the ground. According to the medical examiner, the 28-year-old Delphina did not die immediately but fought in pain for about 20 minutes after the attack. However, the youth's cruelty didn't end there. They did not keep their promise and pursued the children. This reconstruction of events is based on Natasha's statements, which align best with the found evidence, but even her account is not considered completely reliable. Natasha claimed from the start that Jason was the shooter, while Jason defended himself, saying he was incapable of such cruelty. He claimed Joseph was the shooter, while Joseph said he sat in the van with his eyes closed to avoid seeing what was happening. The police believed all the criminals were involved in the massacre. But Jason was a special case because he was a minor and could not be legally held accountable as an adult, which carried the death penalty for such a brutal crime. The perpetrators were caught relatively quickly. A construction worker near the massacre site was sleeping in a building and heard the shots. Initially, he thought they were hunters and ignored the sound, but then there was an eerie silence and loud laughter. As the man admitted, the sound sent a chill down his spine. More shots followed. This combination of frightening noises seemed suspicious to the construction worker, who called the police. At the crime scene, investigators found a gruesome sight: 4 bodies stacked in a ditch. When the police discovered the bodies, Delphina was still twitching in pain, but that stopped after a few minutes. The man was dead. Tabitha lay on her father's stomach, breathing despite the terrible gunshot wound. Peter lay face down in the dirt next to his mother. When the officer approached to turn him over, the boy screamed. The officer stayed with him, called the paramedics, and held his hand until the ambulance arrived. The children were airlifted to a regional hospital, where doctors continued to fight for their lives. Unfortunately, 6-year-old Tabitha soon died. Only a few dozen meters away stood an abandoned blue Chevrolet with headlights dimly illuminating the darkness. Tire tracks of another vehicle were also found there, later used to identify the couple's van. A plan for a manhunt was announced, and all nearby roads were closed. All vehicles were searched. The Chevrolet, which the young crazies had left at the massacre site, was crucial. The license plate was quickly found, and it turned out it had been torn off and thrown away a kilometer from the scene. This led the police to contact Joseph's mother, who had reported her son's car stolen 2 days before the incident. She also mentioned Natasha, with whom her son planned to flee to Mexico. The car with the young people was stopped at the Mexican border. They had no documents with them. On April 8, around 5 p.m., they reached the U.S. border, where their vehicle was checked against the database. It was found that the car was reported stolen and the perpetrators were possibly involved in a triple murder. The Satanists were then escorted back by police officers. Natasha Cornett, 18, Karen Howell, 17, Joseph Risner, 20, Jason Bryant, 14, Edward Dean Marlin, 19, and Crystal Sturgill, 18, were arrested. After the young people were arrested, they quickly confessed to the car theft. When it became clear that it was pointless to deny the murders, they told an absurd story that the family had died in an accident, as if they had been run over by a van while turning around. All this supposedly happened by accident, but the police knew the family had been shot. After the arrest, it was found that Jason had gunshot wounds to his arm and leg. There were very contradictory statements about the origin of these injuries. The teenager himself claimed he had been shot by Joseph when he refused to take the blame for the massacre. Others believed the young man did it himself to create a convincing alibi. Even before the trial began, the judge was repeatedly asked by the defense to hold separate hearings for each defendant. The lawyers also requested to move the trial to another district where the incident was not widely known. All these requests were denied. The 4 older participants faced the death penalty, while Karen and Jason faced life imprisonment without parole. Faced with this threat, the local community came together, demanding the death penalty for these bloodthirsty subhumans. Every session saw a crowd outside the courthouse chanting, "Burn in hell." During the interrogations, each Satanist tried to blame the others. Most accused Jason because of his young age. However, all stories were different, making it impossible to determine the exact chronology of events and understand who exactly shot the Lillylid family. There is still debate about this today. The judge concluded that each person played a role leading to the inevitable shooting of the family. Not everyone pulled the trigger, but all were present at the kidnapping and murder and did nothing to stop it. No one helped or saved the family, even though the opportunity was there. Consequently, each of them was guilty. The hearing began in March 1998. By then, all 6 had pleaded guilty on the advice of their lawyers as part of a deal with the prosecution, guaranteeing them life sentences without parole and helping them avoid the death penalty. However, this lenient solution had many opponents among the locals who demanded the execution of the young monsters, who did not deserve leniency. To this day, the 6 perpetrators try to reopen the case in their defense, claiming they were too young to understand what they were doing and could not stand up to the others. They continue to deny their involvement, blaming each other. Natasha, the group's leader, was the first to appeal, but she was denied like the others. In 2017, Karen wrote a letter stating she was innocent, had nothing to do with the family's shooting, and did not deserve a life sentence like the other murderers. She dispelled some rumors that their group was a sect and that they had arranged the bodies in the shape of a cross, calling it all false and claiming they were just a group of disturbed teenagers. Peter, the 2-year-old who miraculously survived, took a long time to recover mentally and physically and now has to wear an eye prosthesis for the rest of his life. The family of Lililid and Delphina later fought for custody. The boy eventually moved to Sweden to live with his aunt. He never fully recovered from the incident, but as an adult, he returned to the United States, where he started a family and made a career. To this day, it cannot be said with certainty what exactly happened on that deserted road where the family was shot at close range. Even today, locals who have never experienced such brutality remember this tragedy with horror. Thanks for watching, and take care.